So what we got here is I'm going to make the back brackets. If you look at the screen use sets, they have these mystery little brackets that have a little V-notch cut into them. People speculate it could be, you know, for an optional pack if the characters were going to actually, you know, have packs when they were moving around, that would lock in, as opposed to, you know, strapping system. It would lock right into the armor. Whatever it actually is, they never did anything with it on this in the movie, but we got to put them there all the same because it's a, you know, pretty important aesthetic part of the back of the armor. So we only need 3. I'm going to make 4 because I'm going to consider 1 as my practice and hopefully fine tune it. I'm going to leave them attached to the big plate for now, and I'm going to use an angle grinder with an aluminum cutoff wheel. It's designed specifically for aluminum so it won't gum up. I'm going to cut out the notch first, because if I cut out the whole shape first and then I'm holding this with my fingers trying to get the notch, there's a good chance I'm going to come away minus a fingernail. So I'm going to hold it up here, use the angle grinder to cut out the notches first, and then I'm going to go in and cut out the shapes when I've got that done. And then we got to round off these edges. We'll go over that when we fine tune it. But for now, this is just some base 16 gauge aluminum. It's pretty thick stuff. This is actually the same stuff I'm going to, well, might have already built the shin guards with. But I like them. I like these things to be nice and thick. And we're just going to put them in a vise and hammer them out so that the middle section here is raised up, and the bottom tabs are going to get holes in them with rivets. They're going to look pretty sharp. Got pretty good confidence in this. Continuing our segment on the other things you need as we moved away from the core construction of our main armor materials to the accessories that you need to finish everything off. One of the things we are going to need is the bracket. I showed you how I started to cut those out. This one is my practice one. I think I can do better on these other ones. But the main thing is that we've got our edges rounded off. We've hit the V notch, used a Dremel to clean it up and make it a little more round. They're all pretty uniform. So I've still got my lines visible here. I don't think we need to worry about annealing these, because even at 14 gauge aluminum, when you're not trying to make a complex shape, you can stick it in a vise and hammer it, and that's all we're really doing. So you don't need a huge hammer, just something you can control to get it to 45 degrees. And then we're going to come up to our next line and move it back. So if you want, you can do that with, well, probably the best way is to get a chisel in there behind it. And give it your tap, tap, tap. Then once you got enough room, you could maybe even just bring the real thing. I might just use the chisel all the way. Now we flip it over. We do the same thing on this side. There you go. This one actually may even be a little too rigid, a little too square. Maybe you can round it off a little bit, make it look a little more natural, not go quite as far. Or if you do find a round portion, and just hammer the corner down, kind of round it off again a bit. And your back is going to have a slight roundness to it also. So there you go. Now we've got 2. Just going to do one more. Actually, I'm going to do both and then pick the ones I think are the best 3. But these are going to be positioned on your back. We're going to drill holes through them, put rivets in them, and those are going to be our back brackets. Easy peasy. Next on the list of things that we are going to need as accessories is we've got to make a couple of these little guys. To do that, I use just galvanized sheet metal because it's dirt cheap and it's fairly strong. You could probably keep using the same aluminum that you have been using, but it's super easy. To tin snips, just cut out some strips, 1-inch strips, bend them off, use some pliers. They don't have to be pretty, but the whole idea is that they are going to go into your 1-inch buckles. And once you get those, you're going to cut it to that shape, drill a hole down the middle, and that is what you will do on your shin guards. You're going to just rivet those right into place to be able to finish off your shin guards. So like I say, that'll take just like 5 minutes. Super quick, super easy, but necessary. You're going to have to build 4 of them, of course, 2 for each female end of the buckles that'll go on your shin guard. So what we've got here is one of the accessories you're going to need. You're not going to be able to make this by hand per se. This is the ear defender for your ear flap, your ear cup. This is physically where the padding goes, where your radio runs right through. You can order these resin casts of the screen used item from a couple places. One is from Chef's Creations in the UK. He sells just the cast of the earpiece. Spat at spatcave.com sells casts of an entire screen used assembly. The cast is excellent if you are looking for resin, a resin helmet. This piece is actually screen used. The rest of Spat stuff I believe is sculpted by him, but this is cast off something that was used, and the cast is great. I don't know if you can make it out there. It's incredibly clean, and you can even just make out the brush strokes of the paint that was on the original. It's a very good cast. But we are attaching our own one of these pieces. We don't need a resin one. So that's why in the past I've ordered from Chef in the UK, because he does just the basic cast, and it's easier to work with because it's ready for you to just bolt your piece right onto. But you got international shipping, and if I'm not ordering a bunch of stuff from Chef, I'm certainly not going to pay triple in freight what the item cost. So in this case I just used it, got it from Spat because it was quicker. Barely, waited a long time for it anyway, but and it was cheaper the shipping, actually kind of barely. Anyways, it got here. It's what I needed. It does have this cut out because he's expecting you to stick a strap through it. We're not doing that. We're going to put the strap bolted up top and run it out the bottom of our metal piece, so we didn't need to run it in there. But the point is, it's very lovely and also completely useless to us. So here we have our shape. I think it goes without saying that anytime you're sanding resin, you need to be in a well-ventilated, open area and probably wearing respiratory protection. Shouldn't have to tell you guys to protect your lungs, but that you need to. But as for the piece, it's pretty much ready to bolt our metal onto. We don't really need to delete the entire shape. Our metal piece is going to cover up anything here, the one we made. If I do decide it needs to come down a little lower, get rid of these edges, I'm going to do that with a hand file. I'm not going to do something quite as destructive as an angle grinder on that one. I was using a sanding flapper disc, they call them, where it's layers of sandpaper overlapping in the disc. I didn't show you guys the inside of that, but it's a flap disc. If you guys are looking for them for your own angle grinders, it makes pretty short work of wood, metal. Well, not so much wood. Most angle grinders will burn up wood because they rotate. The RPMs are too high. Anyways, so this is about ready. We just need to drill our holes in the front and the back for our microphones, and we need to find a squishy pad for the inside. Otherwise, we are ready to bolt over our metal pieces onto this and get it attached to a helmet. Following up on the ear cup that you definitely need, this is not an optional part. You're going to want to pair that up with some kind of padding. This is an old on-ear speakerphone from one of my son's headsets that he destroyed. It's not perfect. I believe it is close enough where I can certainly get the wrap over it. Obviously, if you can get a rectangular one, an over-the-ear muff of some type padding, that would certainly be better, but this is still going to work good and serve our purpose. As soon as it gets bolted into the helmet, this is going to be soft, comfortable on the ear, and it's going to look good. The other thing you're absolutely going to need is a helmet camera. This is a resin cast off of a screen used one sold by Spat Cave. Chef also sells these. You can find recasts, most likely. Somebody either bought Chef's or Spat's and then started making their own molds. It's what they call recasting. It's very frowned upon. But if you ever look on eBay, this is the poorly casted garbage version of this that you'll find there. Spat and Chef are both reputable, and they both do pretty good casts. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that they're going to come with a cast Pentax camera lens. And the camera lens, if you compare a resin to a real one, it's just not even close. This is a Pentax 110 18mm camera lens. This is a vintage 80s part that was actually used on the original helmets. And these are all over eBay, often for around $25 to $40. At least the last time I bought it. I've bought 4 of these things in my life, and I've never paid more than $30 plus shipping. So you should be able to find them, and they just look so much better than a resin anything. It doesn't matter how good you think you are with models. Nothing beats an original. And as an added advantage, Spat's camera body, he molded in the cap that covers the back end, so you can literally just pop it in, twist it into place, and it stays there. This one is a little crooked. I guess I got a little bit of a rough cast in here, but that's one of the cool things about the Spat kits. I'm going to glue it in regardless because I don't want this thing twisting and accidentally falling out. The other thing you're going to need is a microphone, a boom coming out of your earpiece. This one is scratch built by me using just some 3/16 rod, some 1/2-inch aluminum tube, outer diameter 1/2-inch, and some 1/2-inch inner diameter copper pipe with some washers just to keep it in place. I'm going to tidy it up. I'm going to use a little steel stick or JB weld or something to firm everything up, but this is extremely close to what they really use, that being the Bayer Dynamic or Bayer Dynamisch if you're German. HM 560 headphone set. They are insanely hard to find, the originals. You can also buy resin casts of these headsets from all the guys we've always been talking about. Personally, I like the metal, so I just slap this together out of metal. And once I get it JB welded into place and painted, I think it's going to give me a better effect than a resin cast. But if you can find an original, more power to you. They were also used in the Smart Gun headsets, so people, they're after these. And if you get lucky enough to find one, be prepared to pay. It's expensive. So all of these, you don't necessarily need the version I've got here, obviously, but you do need them. You got to have an ear cup, you got to have a microphone, you got to have a camera. Those are all pieces necessary for the helmet to complete the look. The one optional thing I have here is olive drab or khaki helmet band. The ones from the film were never completely ID'd because they're thicker. They're bigger than the modern ones, but in a pinch, a good modern headband is always nice, especially if you're planning on putting a helmet cover on it. It's not necessary. You don't need a headband. Apone and Wierzbowski didn't have headbands. It is perfectly screen accurate to say, I don't need a headband. And if you've got yourself a nice tight fit on your helmet bump plate and you want to show it off by having an unobstructed view, then more power to you. Nuts to that thing. But these things you do need, one way or the other, whether you improvise it out of something you built, whether you buy a cast from someone who sells them, or whether you find the original parts in order to utilize for your own build, that's up to you, but you're going to need them. I'm going to call this an optional accessory. Some people might consider it essential. This is the liner of the helmet. The liner is obviously essential. You must have a liner. Without the liner, your helmet is literally just this. It's empty. You could probably pad it with foam maybe, but if you're going to go to the trouble of having a steel helmet, get the liner that goes with it. So this liner is been modified. Obviously, you're going to need to cut it out to match the cut to make room for your ear flap. The other thing I cut is to make room for my IR sight. The hole I cut in here is specifically and directly related to the hole I cut in here to install the IR sight, to try to get that pushed away from your temple, away from your forehead. So obviously the Marines in the film had IR sights. They didn't necessarily use them all the time. In my first 2 or 3 armor builds, I never even bothered to install an IR sight. This one, I've gone and actually found a Mars Attacks IR sight, which everything you see here is metal and acrylic. It's got LED lights, it's got a battery system, and it, of course, drops. As soon as it drops down, the battery lights up. The battery's not in there right now, so you're not going to see that effect. But that combination, well, dropping this into here, and once you pop this in, you see how that fits in there, and that's all covered up by the bump plate. And now I don't have the IR sight rubbing against my head, and I have plenty of room for it to function, gravity fed, friction fed at the top. So an IR sight in general doesn't have to be this metal Mars Attacks one that has not been made in I think 10 years, and they can be fairly costly to buy on the secondary market. You can buy resin ones from Spat and Chef. They both sell one. I've never owned a Spat one. I have had a Chef one at one point on my last set of armor that I sold. It looks identical to this, except everything's 3D printed plastic instead of metal. It still functioned very nice. It lit up. It was great. Spats, I know, also light up. I believe the light up kit's an accessory that you can add to it. It doesn't come default light up. But they're fun effects, you know. You drop the sight down, quote your lines, and it does glow, so it definitely puts on a show for people around you. Can be a cool accessory. And like I said, any Marine that had a helmet had an IR sight, so you might say that it's something that was standard and required, but it, you know, if you don't have it, nobody's going to notice, most likely, and nobody's ever going to call you out on it. So I'm not prepared to call this 100% required, but it's a nifty thing to add if you can. If you've got the willingness and the ability to grab one, then you should. Alright, the next thing we're going to need is rivets. Here is my rivet tray. Got a whole bunch of different kinds. Buttons, round cap, double button caps, pop rivets. A lot of people use pop rivets because they're easy, or at least people think they're easy. Personally, I hate them. You have to drill your holes bigger. It's harder to get them through the nylon, and the biggest offender for me personally is they're not accurate. That little hole they leave in the center it's just not, I hate it. I don't like those at all. What I use are these button cap, double button caps. They may look little, but they are strong. And now you don't need to use the set tool because we're not trying to maintain the little subtle curve to it. Literally, you put these through, it goes through the nylon or the webbing easy. You hammer them flat with a hammer, and they are set forever. I have never had one of these ever pop. It's like $8 for a 300 pack, and then if you get like the Joann Fabric or the Michaels or whatever app, then you usually get 40% off any one item, and then so you're like $4 for like 300 rivets with no tools. All you gotta do is hammer them flat with a hammer. This is way easier and a little bit more accurate. Of course, in the real sets they use like nails that they hammer into position and cut the tops off and hammer the ends flat. So that's just a way harder way of doing it. This simplifies everything and still looks good. It still gives you a clean look that looks like it could have been a real rivet once you hammer it flat in the traditional armor making sense. So that's the way I do it. You might want to get the medium size and maybe some small sizes, but even if you just stick with the one major medium size, you can do the whole set with that. No problem. Easy peasy. Next up on the list is going to be our buckles. Traditional side release or Fastex buckles and cam lock buckles that close down tight like this. You're going to need 3 1-inch cam locks. These are going to be for your knee pads on each side, left and right, and then one for the center of the attachment, the bottom attachment of your crotch guard of the ab pad. You're going to need 5 1.5-inch buckles. That is 2 for each side of your ribs, left and right, 1 for your upper shoulder. You're going to need 8 1-inch side release or Fastex buckle, just traditional side release. That is 2 for your shin guards, left and right, 1 for each hip of your ab pad, and then 2 each left and right of your shoulder pauldrons. This is what connects your grenade straps into your shoulder pads. So you need 8 1-inch Fastex or side release buckles, 5 1.5 inch, and then 3 cam locks. And those are the buckles that you're going to need. You can get these most cheaply on eBay, of course. Got to wait for them to show up from China, but I mean, you're talking $4 or $5 for all this. No big deal. Note on the buckles, if you're going to be a quote-unquote rivet counter, like some people call it as a bit of an insult for focusing on accuracy, if you're one of those people, then this is the shape you're looking for. Either, no matter what size your buckle, you want the blocky shape, especially in the 1-inch sizes. They can get a whole lot of variety where they're very sleek and fancy looking and rounded off, but to be more accurate, you want this shape, very blocky. Another note is, you may say, but the buckles are green, so I'm going to order green ones. That's fine. They were painted green in the film, so green does work, but for the base idea, they were black buckles that were painted green. You can see the paint scratched off in many instances, and of course on the screen used surviving props today, it's very clear that they're black buckles painted green. If you want to get green, that's up to you. That's cool. But the main thing is you want to find these blocky shapes if you're going for real accuracy. Otherwise, don't worry about it. I mean, if it functions, it functions. That's the main point. But just giving you guys a quick heads up. Next up is the actual ab pad. You can make this. Just get yourself some gray vinyl. And a side note, they were gray. You can try to sew one up yourself. It actually isn't a bad idea to go ahead and grab some vinyl, because on the shin pads there's a little gasket or a seal that goes on the outside that you can cut right off of it. There is also leather-like gray vinyl on the neck pad, like around your neck, on the chest pad, on the breastplate, I mean, and on the back plate. Where that touches your neck, it's actually gray vinyl is sewed and then glued into place there. So you actually need gray vinyl anyway. Whether or not you feel brave enough to make your own ab pad out of it, that's up to you. You can buy ab pads. This one here is a good dark gray color from Chef's Creations. Spat also sells them. Spat makes them in black though. They look black on screen a lot of the time, so obviously that's totally acceptable. But if you want to be real hardcore, like I've said a couple times, then you're going to go for the gray. Noble, Matt Noble from the Aliens Legacy Forum, he also has made arguably the most accurate ones, but they're not currently in production. If somebody tells you that they've got a Noble pad, I recommend scooping it up. I used to have one. I sold it off with my first set of armor. Obviously, I hope to find another one someday, but Chefs are great too. So I'm going to be happy using Chefs in this case. Sample of the neck bindings, what they call that, where I was telling you about how they sew it and then glue it in place at the top by the neck where it touches the skin. The idea is pretty easy. You fold it back, just run a bead down it with the sewing machine if you're able, and then once you fold it over the metal, you've got that nice clean vinyl look at the top of your armor where it touches your skin, potentially could touch your skin, and it gives overall a good finished look to it. Of course, that was present on the originals, so if you don't want to go that route, that's fine. Nobody's really going to call you out on it or anything, of course, but it's a good detail, and it's really not that hard just to make your own. I'm going to be making my own. I am by no means good at sewing, but with something that simple, I'm going to try. I think it'll look better on the armor. This is sleeping mat. The originals had a Dutch Army sleeping mat that had a grid pattern in it. Obviously those are pretty much long gone, being an 80s item, and the few that have remained have been snatched up by collectors, so they can be very difficult to find, possibly very expensive, but any green mat at all is fine. This is where you're going to find the padding under the armor. This really only goes under the shoulder bells, the shoulder pauldrons. Sometimes people put them on the shoulder tab. I've seen examples with and without those from the original maker that sometimes has it on the shoulder tab. Really, you don't need a lot of this, and you don't want to put too much of it in a lot of extra places because this makes the armor very, very warm. So really only the places where the shoulder pads and shoulder plates are rubbing together is where you want to put these, but you should scoop up these. You can find surplus rolls either online or in actual surplus stores, usually for around 15 bucks. So it's not at least it's not an expensive item, at least not going with a modern version, not tracking down the original 80s Dutch one. But it's going to be useful and you'll probably need it. We need the webbing. Right here is a chef grenade strap and belt combo. These are really not that complicated. If you get 2-inch cotton webbing, I recommend cotton because it's thicker, it's heavier, it looks better. The originals were made out of British 58 material, military webbing. This, if you get a good heavy cotton webbing, it looks darn near original to the British 58 webbing. So you can make these, you know, just by folding corners and either gluing or taping, and you can sew these up yourself. If you wanted to buy them, obviously Chef's Creations has them, Spat sells them. I'm gonna level with you, I let my son use the ones from him. They're a lot thinner, they're not nearly as heavy duty, they're not nearly as accurate, but Chef has good heavy duty ones. Noble, again, the guy I was talking about with the ab pad, he made a run of these that are arguably, again, the best, most accurate ones. They are also, again, not currently in production. You're going to have to find them in the secondary market. But like I said, it's really not hard to make your own. Just get the 2-inch cotton webbing, a 2-inch Fastex side release buckle, and some 1-inch webbing in OD, olive drab or green. And you can make these up real quick with either a sewing machine or even liquid stitch. If you want to get real hardcore, get real accurate, this can come off with Velcro. Put a Velcro backing on your loops. That's, again, how they were on screen, so that's why these are more accurate and much more heavy duty of the options. Nobles and Chefs all have those features. You're, of course, going to need 1-inch black webbing. Nylon is fine for this. It doesn't have to be cotton. The black looks good no matter what it is, and oftentimes you can get it pretty heavy duty. So you're going to need at least 1 yard, probably 2 yards. This is where you're going to get your straps for your lobster plates coming off your helmet, for your tail pad. A lot of it was black webbing. Really, most of it was black webbing that actually straps the armor together. The exceptions being 1-inch green nylon for the back of your knee. This is what went around the knee pad with the camlock buckle. What goes around your buttocks area when you're securing your ab pad. And then there is 2-inch webbing that goes under your shoulder tabs, that goes up underneath the shoulder bell. So 2-inch green webbing is what held the center shoulder tab in place. Most of the rest of it is either black 1-inch webbing or 1.5-inch nylon webbing. You're going to need a couple yards of this. This is what actually connects your ribs together. You know, the Fastex buckles from the chest plate and the back plate. You're going to need the 1.5-inch for that. So, you know, a general assortment of 1-inch and 1.5-inch webbing for sure. If you want to make your own you know, grenade straps and belt, then you might need some more 2-inch webbing. And if it's black or green, it really doesn't matter. Like I said, unless you're going to be a rivet counter, which in this case I'm going to err on that side. You know, you just need a little bit, a couple yards of the green. So you could do the whole thing in black, the whole thing in green. It really isn't that big a deal. But I happen to have this stuff laying around, so I'm just going to match it up as best I can to the way it was originally done. So 1-inch, 1.5-inch, and some 2-inch webbing. You're going to need at least a couple yards. As cool as it would be to run around in that bare, awesome looking silver armor, we are going to need paint as well. So next up we have our paint. They say the originals were painted using Umbral brand paints, which is actually in England. You're going to have to order it online if you're in the United States. Of a dark green, matte 30, a chocolate brown, number 170, a black green, number 91. This finish is darker than the cap would indicate here, and a matte sand. I have spent years just trying to find equivalents. I end up using a lot of times acrylics that I mix up on my own and get as close as I can. I don't really have any true suggestions for you because almost all this is mixed. At one point, I went to Home Depot and tried to find close matches, and I found, various vinyl paints that are great for if you want to do a camo pattern on your wall. Not necessarily so great for the armor because it does peel off fairly easy being vinyl base. I would stick with an enamel or an acrylic, but the whole point is you do need a lighter green, a much darker green, a good brown, and a good tan. The original gray, I don't recall, but I mean it's gray. Just mix white and black, you'll get a gray. A good alternative I found at one point is the Model Master Dunkelgrün 71. I found to be a very good match for the lighter of the green colors. Of course, just our luck, that got discontinued very recently. So you don't have to be exact, but the gist is you need a lighter green, a darker green, a tan, and a brown with some gray wisps that we're going to put into it. Once that's all done, it's probably going to finish very light, and we got to work into our weathering. To do that, you can either do charcoal and then seal it with a dull coat of something. You can use what they call grate polish or stove polish. This is the liquid version. This is the paste version. And this, of course, is just shoe polish, black shoe polish, which is I found to be very similar to the stove polish. The gist of this is you just smear it all over your armor, and it makes things a much darker color. The good thing about the stove polish is that it's wax-based, so that if you really mess it up, it can be scrubbed off, but it's also at the same time fairly durable. So you've got some wiggle room there. Now, obviously, if you use a wax-based weathering agent like this to make it look darker, then you're not going to be able to paint over the top of it because you're not going to paint on the top of wax. That's just silly. It won't hold up. But for just a quick coat of something to get it more darker, to get it looking roughed up, to look like it's been aged, any of these three are great options in my opinion. I've also done the charcoal. It's okay too. You also could take a black can of spray paint, rattle can it just from about 2 or 3 feet away, and just create a cloud of dust that'll settle onto it and wear it down. The other color you're going to want to find is the ever famous Brown Bess. Umbral Brown Bess number 98 is what they painted everything. Pulse rifles, belt tools, helmet cameras, the overhead lamps, the shoulder lamps that they use. Everything was painted Brown Bess, and with the blue filter on screen combined with the low light conditions, makes it look olive drab on film. So you can either get just any generic olive drab paint to paint all the rest of your gear, your helmet, camera, and other things, or if you're lucky, you can find Umbral Brown Bess. The problem with this is it's a discontinued color. They quit making it a long time ago, and they reformulated it prior to discontinuing it and called it Super Enamel. The Umbral Super Enamel Brown Bess is not the same color as the original Brown Bess. This one, depending on what light you have it in, it will look olive drab on its own. You get it under warm light or cool light. I did a thread in the forum, Aliens Legacy, where I took 8 pictures and 8 different lightings, and it looks like a completely different color every time. Brown Bess is truly a unique color, but it is hard to find now in its original form. So there are companies who have tried to make it. All Clad is an airbrush company. They make, literally, they call it British Brown Bess. It is not quite the same as the original. I think this is probably more similar to the Super Enamel Brown Bess. There's a whole lot of people who have tried to recreate it on their own using combinations of things. They get it custom mixed. Anyways, it's all your preference how deep into that rabbit hole you want to go of the Brown Bess versus olive drab debate. The main thing is for the armor. You're going to probably want maybe just to use olive drab for your helmet camera if it's simpler for you. The main thing is you need your light green, your dark green, your tan, and your brown. So find those, you'll be good to go.